Buenos dias. Okay, we're going to talk about using the subjunctive. So first thing to realize is that the subjunctive mood in Spanish is not a tense. We are not learning another verb tense. It is a category of verbs, a way of using verbs that we haven't used before. What we do know is that there is an entire category of verbs that we've worked a lot with, and it's called the indicative mood. In the indicative mood, there are 7 tenses. We've worked with present and preterite and imperfect. We've done the perfect tenses, at least as far as the present, and we have worked with progressive in the present. So we've worked a lot in the indicative mood. As we start now looking at what's called the subjunctive mood, you're going to find that really, basically, there are really only 2 tenses. There is present subjunctive and past. And then a way of using the present subjunctive and the past subjunctive that are going to be very familiar to you because we've worked with perfect tenses already. Okay, so let's see what the subjunctive verb. Subjunctive verbs, as we're looking at these sentences, the sentences on the left do not contain subjunctive. So the sentences to the left contain verb forms that you are used to, that you've seen before, that are conjugated here, just simple present tense. When we look at sentences to the right, you'll see that the verbs do not exactly look like what we've been used to. These verbs are in the subjunctive mood, so the question is why? So looking at the pairs of sentences, if I look at the ones on the left, something like yo sé que la corrida de toros empieza. It's a compound sentence. It does have 2 parts to it, or 2 verbs. You can see in the first part of the sentence, the verb saber, second part of the sentence using empezar, and so putting the 2 pieces together. Look at the right. Yo quiero que la corrida de toros empiece. Once again, it's made up of 2 parts. There's the quiero verb in the beginning of the sentence, and then a form in the subjunctive. So the question is, why do the sentences on the left not require subjunctive, but the sentences on the right do require subjunctive? It's not the structure of the sentence, so it must be the meaning of the sentence. So when we start talking about using the subjunctive mood, it's going to be because of what we're saying. Formation of the subjunctive, the spelling, in other words, of those verb forms that look almost like they're spelled with the wrong endings, are based on the yo form of any given verb. So you start with, for instance, hablo, cross off the o, so we're finding a stem, but it's not the stem from the infinitive. To that stem, you're going to add what look like the opposite vowel endings. So for the AR verbs, you're going to be using E's. For the ER and IR verbs, you will find A's. And this is what it will look like as you conjugate an AR verb in the present subjunctive, looking at how those endings are a pattern, es, hemos, en, of incorrect vowels, if you want to think of it that way, because that's an AR verb. Look at what happens with the ER and the IR verbs, and again, same kind of thing. There's a pattern that's predictable, almost but with the quote-unquote wrong vowel. So that's for formation or spelling of subjunctive verbs. And as we look at then the meaning of those, we're going to be interested in a few things. First of all, the sentence that we're considering using subjunctive in must be complex. That means it has to have 2 different clauses or 2 mini sentences. Okay? Those 2 clauses must have 2 different subjects. So it cannot be the same person in both halves of the sentence. And the first part of the first clause of the sentence must then contain a specific kind of expression because it is driven by the meaning of the sentence. So let's look at what kinds of expressions we're talking about. The expressions, we can think of an acronym to remember. If you think of the acronym WIDE, wide, then we have a category of verbs. Okay, when you are wishing or wanting someone else to do something. If you are using an impersonal expression about what someone else is doing, if you're expressing doubt, disbelief, or denial about what someone else is doing, or emotions about what someone else is doing, then in that second half, the about part of your sentence, you're going to find a subjunctive verb form. So in the second half of the sentence. Here are some verbs that express wishing and wanting, and they are verbs that you've worked with before. So if I'm going to use I permit you to come, permitir, I want him to leave, querer, wanting, desiring that someone do something, mandating that you do it, beg, rogar, recomendar, to recommend that you do it is my will, okay? If I tell you to, if I suggest that you do something, if someone allows you to do it, dejar can mean to allow. Advise, if someone advises you to, if someone hopes that you will, it's still implying what they wish or want if they insist or if they request. Those are all ways to express wishing or wanting. If I put it into a compound sentence where I'm wishing or wanting, suggesting or hoping that someone else do something, I will be using subjunctive. Impersonal expressions look like this. They all start out with as, okay? And so they are things like, it's probable, it's doubtful, it's important, it's necessary, it's possible, it's necessary again, it's a shame. Again, those all would require you to use the subjunctive in the second part of your sentence if indeed you have one of these expressions. They're called impersonal because it is probable, it is doubtful, it is important. You're working with it. That's very impersonal. Okay, notice that the asterisk talks about a few that would not require subjunctive, because if subjunctive is driven by meaning, you're going to see some like es cierto, es seguro, es evidente, es verdad, that eliminate doubt, and that means that there will be no subjunctive. Subjunctive is not needed when the sentences are absolutely clear. If I am in the realm of wishing or wanting or permitting or hoping or implying something about when some expression that implies an opinion about what someone's doing, if I am again expressing doubt, dudar, disbelief, no creer, doubt, do you believe it? Creer. Or denial, negar, to deny, about what someone's doing. If I am expressing emotions about what someone's doing, alegrarse, to be happy about, sentir, to regret, temer, to fear, tener miedo, to be afraid, gustar, to like, ojalá, to hope. Me sorprende que, it surprises me that, estar with any type of emotion about what someone is doing will all be considered reasons to use subjunctive in the secondary clause. I know it seems like a lot to think about, but honestly it becomes very easy. So if we look at a couple of sentences and think about how it would work. La clase sabe que la profesora querer ayudar. These clauses are easy to recognize if you look for K. So when I say these clauses, the noun clause, the secondary clause, the one where you might use subjunctive, but the way you make that decision is examine the first part of the sentence. See if there's something in here that expresses wishing or wanting what someone else do. Impersonal expressions, they're easy to find. They start with S. Doubt, disbelief, denial, emotion about what someone else is doing. If you find one of those, you are going to then think about using subjunctive. But in this sentence, this first one we have, la clase sabe, the class knows, that's not doubtful. In fact, it's the opposite of doubt. So I'm just going to conjugate this the way I always would. I would just use a simple quiere, que la profesora quiere ayudar, and be working with indicative. Look at the second sentence. La clase quiere que la profesora ayudar. So we do have que, which will introduce the secondary clause. And now I look at the first clause to see if there's an expression of wishing or wanting, impersonal expression, doubt, disbelief, denial, or emotion. The class wants. If the class wants the teacher to do something, then yes, I'm going to use subjunctive, because wishing or wanting that someone else do something requires subjunctive in the second clause. So ayudar would be conjugated ayude. Again, I'm doing this with the opposite vowel added to the yo form. Es verdad que la clase trabajar mucho. Es verdad. Well, if something is true, it's the opposite of doubtful. Remember, one of the reasons to use subjunctive is doubt. So if there's no doubt, there's no subjunctive, even though this sentence does have a K clause, okay, a secondary clause, but there's no doubt, so there's no subjunctive. I would just do trabaja the way I would have conjugated anyway in the regular indicative. Es necesario in the next one. Well, that's an impersonal expression. Okay, anything starting with es that doesn't wipe out doubt is considered to be impersonal expression. So in this sentence, it's necessary. There's the K clause that the class do all the work or all the homework. I do need subjunctive. So remember we said start with the yo form? I would start with hago. I would get rid of the O and put the opposite vowel. So because it's an ER verb, that's my subjunctive form, haga. Looking at the last example, saben, what do they know? Well, right away I can see something's very clear. They know it. Even though there is another clause in here, they know that the book has good exercises. Because there's no doubt, there's no subjunctive. So I would just conjugate with tiene. Durante el libro. Okay, begins the secondary clause. Doubt that something else is doing something. So I do need subjunctive. I will use explique, and I'll spell with a QU so that I am maintaining the sound of explicar. Now you remember when we talked about change the C to QU will be important? It's important. Comprenden, they understand. Here's my K clause, that they need to work a lot. So if they understand that they need to, then there's no subjunctive here. There's no doubt or disbelief or denial. It's simply a statement of fact. Okay? The last one starts with emotion. So because I know this verb, alegrarse means to be happy, to be joyful. So they are happy. What are they happy about? That the course ends soon. Okay, that means it's emotion about what something else or someone else is doing, happens to be the course. So I do need subjunctive. It would be, I will start with termino, cross off the O and use the opposite vowel. That's what it looks like. Okay, por eso. Here's what we said. Para usar el subjuntivo. So to use subjunctive, remember, the subjunctive, first of all, is not a tense, okay? It's a mood. So the subjunctive is a category of verbs. This subjunctive mood appears in complex sentences. It has to be a kind of a long sentence with at least the two clauses. The subjunctive may appear in the secondary clause, in the noun clause. It's the only type we're doing. And it will be introduced by K. And finally, the main clause, the main part of your sentence has to have a W-I-D or E expression, wishing or wanting, impersonal expression, doubt, disbelief, denial, about what someone else is doing. And this is the piece that would have the subjunctive. It's the second part of your sentence. El fin? El fin. Okay, so we'll be practicing a lot with these in class. Watch the video again if you need to. Buena suerte.